Hey everyone, it's Rob B here with Rob D, and you are listening to the Property Podcast. Wowzers, this is going to be such a good episode. It's one of our favourite episodes of the year, where we give you a list of all our best resources. Apps, books, podcasts, YouTube channels, the lot.
Welcome to the Property Podcast. Thank you for joining us. Gonna level with you. Not a whole lot of property in this episode, but absolutely tons of resources and things for you to check out. I think you'll really enjoy it. And do check out the show notes for this episode in your podcast app, where you'll find links to everything we talk about.
So it's time for our news story of the week. And this week's news story is the autumn statement. So before we give you our opinion, Rob, do you want to do a roundup of all the big news stories out of the autumn statements that directly impact the property industry and landlords?
Yeah, it's a short list. In fact, I'd say that there's nothing directly affecting landlords. So apparently they're going to have a new type of permitted development that allows any home to be subdivided into 2 flats without planning permission. And there's also supposed to be a fast-track planning service where developers can pay extra to get a decision through in a certain time frame and get their money back if that deadline is missed. There's also some much needed support for tenants on housing benefit. The housing allowance has been frozen for the last 3 years, which means, of course, that fewer and fewer properties have become affordable under it. That is now being raised back to where it should have been, so it'll cover the least expensive 30% of properties in the local area. And again, not directly affecting investors, but for first-time buyers, the mortgage guarantee scheme that's been running for a few years now, that encourages lenders to issue loans of up to 95%, was supposed to come to an end soon. That's been extended through to the middle of 2025. So, Rob, there have been rumours of things around stamp duty, inheritance tax, all kinds of eye-catching measures, but none of them made it in.
No, it was a quiet budget overall, and it was a quiet budget for property. But you know what? After some of the budgets that we've had, or autumn statements, as I should correctly call it, I'm happy with that. We've just been left alone and property can carry on as it is. Yes, there's some minor changes there, but nothing that's going to make a dramatic impact one way or another. Yes, it would be nice to get stuff and receive boosts to the sector, but come on, let's be realistic. I think we can accept a nothing budget as a good budget these days, and I think that's what we've got here, Rob.
Yep, if you'd offered this to me in advance, I would have taken it. So all good there. Something else that you should be grabbing with both hands, in fact, is a subscription to the Property Hub magazine. And now is the perfect time to do that, because finally, after 7 years, something like that, a really, really long time of us never putting the prices up, we will shortly be increasing the price of an annual subscription. But if you subscribe now, you can get in at the current price and keep that price for at least a year. And of course, Rob, you don't just get it dropping onto your doormat every couple of months. You'll also instantly get access to over 40 digital back issues. So a treasure trove of stuff to go through.
Yeah, this is a phenomenal deal. So make sure you take advantage of it. Go to propertyhub.net/magazine. Lock in this ridiculous low price for at least another year. We won't touch your price for at least that long. But for everyone else who's going to be a subscriber after this offer passes, they'll be paying more. So if you've been tempted to get the magazine for a while, why not treat yourself as Christmas comes up? Get yourself over to propertyhub.net/magazine and get yourself possibly the best deal that you can do in property.
Oh, today is a great day. I've got to say, this is one of, if not my favourite pod of the year to record. We're doing the best of Hub Extra, our favourite things that we've read, listened to, watched and played around with this year. This is always so much fun because you pick up loads from each other. And we know from the feedback we've had in previous years that you love it too. So we've actually brought it slightly forward in the year. So if you do want to use this for Christmas gift ideas, which believe it or not, some people do, we hear from them, you've got a bit more time to do that. So let's start with our favourite books of the year. And Rob, there's one I know you mentioned on the podcast before that really blew you away this year.
Yes, my book of the year is Red Notice by Bill Browder. This book, from start to finish, was absolutely fantastic. And it's crazy to think that this is a true story. I wouldn't be surprised if a film is made off the back of this book. It is just fascinating. It's about a man's journey through life, really, but it follows his career and then his career into Russia, where after the Berlin Wall goes down, he starts an investment house investing in companies in Russia and East Europe. It's an incredible journey through that time, but then it seems to turn into some sort of spy novel. I won't say too much more, but it's just a must read or listen to if you like Audible, because it was one of those books that it was just sad to end. I absolutely love it, and I highly recommend it for Christmas or just now. Go and buy it. You'll enjoy it, I promise you.
I'm a numbers guy, so I'll start with some important ones. 260, 1, and 4,500,000,000. Here's what they mean. Every other weekend, I traveled from Moscow, the city where I lived, to London, the city I called home. I had made the trip 260 times over the last 10 years. The one purpose of this trip was to visit my son David, then 8, who lived with my ex-wife in Hampstead. When we divorced, I made a commitment to visit him every other weekend, no matter what. I had never broken it. There were 4,500,000,000 reasons to return to Moscow so regularly. This was the total dollar value of assets under management by my firm, Hermitage Capital. I was the founder and CEO, and over the previous decade, I had made many people a lot of money.
Not often you heap that much praise onto a book, so definitely worth checking out. And it's reminded me, because of the Russian connection, to a fiction book called A Gentleman in Moscow by Amor Towles. And this is a few years old now, at least. I know lots of people who read it who were raving about it. I didn't, because I'm not super into fiction. But I did read it this year, and it is fantastic. Some books are written. This book was crafted. The writing and the way the characters are described is absolutely phenomenal. So if you are into your fiction, A Gentleman in Moscow, well worth checking out.
Are you the author of this long poem of 1913, Where Is It Now? Rostov. It has been attributed to me. Vyshinsky. Why did you write the poem? Rostov. It demanded to be written. I simply happened to be sitting at the particular desk on the particular morning when it chose to make its demands.
Another book that I absolutely adored this year was Breathe, A Life in Flow. And the book's by Peter Maguire and Rickson Gracie. And it is the life story of Rickson Gracie. Now, I did not know who Rickson Gracie was before I picked up this book. It was just a recommendation through Amazon. In fact, A Gentleman in Moscow, Rob, is on my list because of Amazon as well. So it seems that that's a good recommendation. I'll pick that one up. I have no interest in jiu-jitsu, but Rickson Gracie is one of the most famous people in the world of jiu-jitsu. I had no idea of that. But it doesn't matter if you have no interest. It is just a beautiful book. It's a wonderful story. It's an interesting story. And getting into the minds of people who think differently, I think, is a real privilege. And that's why I find myself reading non-fiction books, is to really understand people's journeys and stories. And this is an incredible life story. I, again, strongly recommend this book. An absolutely fantastic read.
A few months later, the first Ultimate Fighting Championship took place in Denver, Colorado. Some people were wondering who would win. But my small group of friends, who were beginning to understand the power of jiu-jitsu, knew who would win. The skinny Brazilian guy with the last name Gracie. That skinny guy was Royce Gracie, the first Ultimate Fighting Champion.
Well, listeners may not have an interest in jiu-jitsu. I imagine they probably won't have an interest either in concrete, which is what my next book is about. This is the book Material World by Ed Conway.
Seems like a solid choice to me, Rob.
Oh, no. Well, it's not just about concrete. It's about sand, salt, iron, copper, oil, and lithium. It's about the stuff that the world is built of. And I'd heard about this book for ages. I'd heard people raving about it, but it doesn't sound very exciting, does it? Let's be honest. But I capitulated and picked it up, and it is brilliant. It's brilliant because Ed is a great writer and journalist, but it's also brilliant because it just makes you look at the world in a completely new way. And for me, it made me realise, I do not have the first clue about the stuff that the world is actually made of. And I found it absolutely fascinating. And obviously, if you're talking about stuff that you pull out of the ground, it also ties into net zero and all that malarkey. And I came away from that with a far more nuanced understanding of that type of thing as well, because the book shows how it's a lot more complicated than the simplistic targets and narratives and stuff that you tend to hear. So I'd urge you to look beyond the seemingly dry subject matter, because I absolutely love this one.
I was standing on the edge of a precipice, looking down into the deepest hole I had ever seen. At the bottom was a group of people in hard hats, or at least so I was told. They were much too far out to make out with the naked eye. In the ground near them were hundreds of pounds of high explosive. This was enough, I was informed, to demolish a city block.
Well, let's see if we can build on top of that, Rob. And we've got another recommendation, which we've both listed, but I'll give you the space to recommend this one, Rob, because you put me onto it and I really enjoyed it. And that's Outlive by Peter Attia.
Yeah, I'd be interested to hear your big takeaways from this one. But what I loved about this is that this is a book about longevity, but it's not about living forever. It's about living healthier for longer and having your capabilities for longer in life. And it's also not about supplements or trendy cold plunges or whatever. It's about doing the basics. So for me, it cut through a lot of the complexity in this kind of area and got me thinking about, well, what do I want to be able to do? Not today, but in 30 years' time.
Yeah, it's a fascinating read. I struggled with this book to begin with because it is heavy going. And this, at least for me, is only a recommendation if you have a genuine interest in your own health. Now, everyone should, but some people are really interested in it and some people less so. I'd say you have to be quite committed to be enjoying and getting the most out of this book. And I nearly gave up on it, but luckily I shifted my perspective with the book and I did this book through Audible. So how I got through it was taking the chapters like podcasts, and rather than just going, okay, I need to get through this book or where are the lessons, I used to just go on my walk and take a section of the book at a time and just absorb it. And there's a lot in each section. And I must say that it takes a while to get going this book as well, but I think it's worth it because the way he sets the scene for what's to come really then helps you appreciate the lessons from the book. So whereas my first two books, Red Notice and Breathe, are like everyone will probably enjoy these books, they're fantastic reads, Outlive is a strong recommendation for those who have a real interest in their health. But if you just are a bit interested, it may not be for you. But Rob and I really enjoyed this one, so that's why it makes the list.
It had finally dawned on me that the only way to solve the problem was not to get better at catching the eggs. Instead, we needed to try to stop the guy who was throwing them. We had to figure out how to get on top of the building, find the guy, and take him out. I'd have relished that job in real life. As a young boxer, I had a pretty mean left hook. But medicine is obviously a bit more complicated. Ultimately, I realized that we needed to approach the situation, the falling eggs, in an entirely different way, with a different mindset, and using a different set of tools. That, very briefly, is what this book is about.
So that's our best of books, but there's loads more to come. And next up is podcasts. What podcasts have we been listening to this year? And Rob, you've got a bit of a list for us, so why don't you kick us off?
Yeah, I thought it hadn't been a big year for podcasts, but when I started thinking about it, there's more than I first realised. The only one this year that I've become a regular listener of is the David McWilliams podcast. David McWilliams is an Irish economist. So obviously, I'm interested in economics. Many listeners to this show will be as well. But what I love about this podcast is David is a true polymath. So it's not just about economics. He'll weave in history and religion and art and just a really interesting spin on things. So listening to this podcast to me is like sitting in a pub and overhearing a great conversation from someone super smart. So I've really been enjoying this.
Hello there, welcome to the David McWilliams podcast. As always, I'm joined by my old mate, John Davis, to tease out economics, to look at it from a different angle, but also to make economics accessible, to make it less complicated, less complex, and really make it comprehensible to everybody.
From polymaths to bedtime stories. I think it shows where we're at, Rob. So my podcast I'm recommending this year is Nothing Much Happens, Bedtime Stories. So in the past, we've recommended many different apps to help you sleep. And I've really got obsessed with having a good night's sleep. You might be picking up there's a bit of a theme in the resources this year, and it's a health theme. And having good sleep just makes such an incredible difference. I don't think I'm doing any groundbreaking stuff here, but occasionally, and it is occasionally because I do other things to help have a good sleep, I want to have something to help me fall asleep. And it's not very often, but when I do, I've been recently turning to this podcast, which is Nothing Much Happens, Bedtime Stories. And it's a podcast where there's a story going on, soothing voices, the narrators are fantastic, but nothing really happens, and I just find myself falling asleep really, really quickly. Or if I don't have that, I'll just listen to recordings of Rob. Hey, only joking, Rob. But this podcast has really worked for me. You may enjoy it as well. It's worth just having in your feed, just in case you're struggling to sleep one night. Check it out and see how you get on.
Yeah, and if that doesn't work, my book, The Price of Money, is available on Audible.
Our story tonight is called Under the Tree, and it's a story about a day of decorating around the house. It's also about a bowl of oatmeal with cinnamon and apples, a box of ornaments wrapped in paper, and the things that connect us to the past.
I'll rattle through a few quick ones that are maybe a bit more niche. First out, shout out to producer Dan, who put me onto the podcast Tape Notes from John Kennedy. Each episode is an interview with an artist and the producer who produced an album for them. And he gets really geeky into breaking down how that album was made. So this very much in the category of only for enthusiasts. But if you are into music, it's really, really good. And the episode with Fred again, who I've become obsessed with this year, is awesome. Also, I wanted to recognise Tim Ferriss. Obviously, pretty much everyone listening will know who Tim Ferriss is. We were speaking about his work as early as the first few episodes of this podcast. And I kind of drifted away, but I've come back to Tim Ferriss recently. I think he's had some really great conversations on his podcast. And the recent episode with Arthur Brooks in particular, we'll link to, is a really great episode about happiness. It's getting on for 3 hours long, but it is worth it. And I'll also quickly mention something that's not a podcast, but is a tool for finding podcasts, which is Listen Notes, listennotes.com. I've not really brought any new podcasts into my rotation this year, but I've been listening to more one-offs. So if there's someone I've become interested in and I want to find interviews with them, I can go over to listennotes.com, pop in their name, and it's basically a search engine. It'll put up all the podcasts that they've been interviewed on. So if there is a particular person or a particular topic that you want to use the medium of podcasts to learn more about, but you don't know where to start, or you don't necessarily want to have to subscribe to a whole new feed, you can use Listen Notes to find those episodes and download them all as one-offs to your device. So it's really useful.
Are you the type of property investor that likes the best deals possible, but with a helping hand on the way? Let's face it, that's most of us. If that sounds appealing, then you should check out Property Hub Invest. It's not for everyone. In fact, it's not for many people, but for a certain type of person, Property Hub Invest is fantastic. They bring you exclusive deals that you will not find online, and Property Hub Invest is a team full of experts, people who really understand property investment. So if you want to find out more about Property Hub Invest and how it may be able to help you, then go to propertyhub.net/invest. It's time to reveal our list of resources that we've enjoyed on YouTube this year. And I'm going to kick us off, Rob. Again, health theme alert, but a YouTuber called Dr. Brad Stanfield. Now, the reason why I love these videos by Dr. Brad is the level of detail that he goes into. So he often talks about supplements, most of the time. He talks about other things as well. But what I really appreciate about the work that he does is the level of research that he goes to. He really deep dives into each and every subject and is critical as well. On social media, you may come across a supplement you've never heard of before, and everyone is raving about it. It's changed their lives. They've grown, they've got happier, they're stronger, they're more attractive. It's just an incredible super drug. What Dr. Brad does is he'll go in and look for all the scientific evidence, and he goes through all the notes. But rather than it being a dry subject, he makes it really interesting. And I'm one of those people that when I'm interested in a subject, I like to deep dive and I geek out. And I've found that as I've got more interested in my health this year, that Dr. Brad has been one of the best resources out there. Another interesting YouTuber you may want to follow on a similar note is Derek from More Plates, More Dates. Don't let the title of the YouTube channel put you off. He also deep dives into different health-related topics and really gets into the research notes. My favourite is probably Dr. Brad, because they're shorter videos normally, but they're both very, very good.
There's a bit of a health link into my next one as well. Rob, have you heard of Sam Sulek?
It rings a bell, but I couldn't tell. If you gave me 10 guesses, I couldn't tell you who he is.
He's a bodybuilder, and it's worth saying up front, he takes a lot of drugs. Like, probably not the kind of supplements that your guy talks about. He is not natural. But the reason I'm mentioning it is he's absolutely blown up, and it's like the opposite of what you normally see on YouTube. Like, YouTube over time become very optimized, very clickbaity, very much quick cuts, grabbing your attention, trying to hang on to you. And what he does is the opposite. He puts up these really long videos of him just chatting in his car on the way to the gym, and then his entire workout routine. You just watch him for an hour, he chats between sets, he's belching away. It's just really funny. Because for me, this is the return of old school YouTube. What's great about YouTube earlier on was it was just like a way of people sharing their lives. And that's an example of that. I talked earlier in the year as well about Tom the taxi driver and how you can just watch his shifts as he drives around town, picking people up, talking about the routes he's taking. And it feels like this is making a bit of a comeback, and I'm glad it is, because the wonder of YouTube is that however niche your tastes, you can find someone who's making content just for you. So I don't know if it's too early to call this a trend, but I'm going to call it a trend, and I'm going to say I'm enjoying it.
Next on my list is Alex Hormozi. Now, if that name sounds familiar to you, then you may remember that we recommended him last year in our podcast section. But I'd say this year is the year that he's really blown up. I think many people now are aware of him, and understandably so, because the level of the content that he puts out is phenomenal. It's business-related content. So if you are interested in business, and I know many podcast listeners of ours are interested in business, then I think you'd really enjoy his YouTube channel. I'd actually say that if I had to pick between this podcast and this YouTube channel, I'd go for the YouTube channel. The production is top-notch, but the quality of the information and the value delivered in those videos is phenomenal. You can tell he puts a tremendous amount of effort into those videos, but it's based on information and knowledge that is actually useful. It's not just people saying the same old things over and over again. He gives you strategies and tactics that you can actually implement into your business. So Alex Hormozi on YouTube, I've really enjoyed this stuff this year.
Yeah, it is phenomenal. There's one video you sent me and I said, wow, we could just like run our business off this one video for the next 3 years. It's incredible, the stuff that he's sharing. My final one on YouTube is not a channel recommendation, but it's just a how to use YouTube recommendation. And it may be that everyone else is doing this already and I just don't know. But the point is the algorithm is really powerful in recommending stuff that you might enjoy, but you need to help the algorithm. So just by what you watch, it can do a pretty good job. But I've started getting more active and it's really improved it. Like, for example, I'm a bad person. I don't tend to like videos. I just watch them. But if you actually like videos, then that's a stronger signal to the algorithm. Also, adding things to playlists helps it out. But also when you're on your feed, if you see a video that you're just not interested in, if you tap the 3 dots, you get an option for not interested and you get an option for don't recommend this channel. And I found this useful because sometimes I'll watch like cartoons on my account with my son, but I don't want to be recommended stuff like that. So when those started coming out, I just chose not interested. And since then, I've never had anything like that recommended to me. So the tip here is help the algorithm out.
My YouTube tip is a basic one, but it's just a reminder of how powerful it is as a tool to research. I don't think it's any surprise that Rob and I like to geek out on subjects when it's of interest to us. And it's not just watching a 5-minute video, it's going deep on a certain subject. And I've found YouTube and a resource that I've got coming up in a moment very, very powerful for getting into topics that interest me. Whether it's health, chess, or anything else, it's just phenomenal. It's such an incredible tool, and I don't get the sense that many people use YouTube for this reason. They use it more for entertainment, and that's fine. You know, it's not to say there's a right way and a wrong way. But if you have something that's of interest to you, whether it's a place you want to go on holiday, a new health trend, a way to work out, whatever it might be, YouTube is so, so powerful. So it's just a reminder that you've got one of the best research tools that's ever been created for free whenever you want it. And it's just been fantastic for me this year. I've really tripled down on researching with YouTube and another tool, which is coming up in a moment.
Well, let's not hold off from that any longer. Let's move into our tech recommendations section. And Rob, you go first with that one.
Okay, so first up is Spotify for books. So I've got an announcement, ladies and gentlemen. I've cancelled my Audible subscription. So I can't remember how many years I've been subscribed to Audible. Way over 5, probably closer to 7 or 8. A long, long time. And for me, it was a non-negotiable. It was just a subscription that I paid because audiobooks are just so important to me. I like to have a physical book on the go and an Audible book on the go. But now I've switched to Spotify because I already had a Spotify account. So it was easy for me when I realised that Spotify have released books and pretty much the same catalogue as Audible. I went through and checked, and it's very rare that there'll be a book on Audible that isn't on Spotify. And I worked out that for the 1 or 2 occasions it may happen a year, I'd be better off just buying it as a one-off on Audible and just carrying on with my Spotify subscription. So I have switched. Spotify Books now is my go-to for Audible books. Bit controversial, possibly the most controversial thing on this podcast today, but I've done it.
That is controversial. I haven't even got onto using Spotify for podcasts yet. I'm still very much in the mindset of it's for music and nothing else. But if there's a chance to save 10 quid a month or whatever it is, I'm interested. I will go and check out the selection. My first tech recommendation, I don't have loads for tech this year, is Telegram, the messaging app. So I hadn't used it before this year, but I've joined a couple of groups that use Telegram. We use it for our Property Hub Select members, and it's really good. It's better than WhatsApp in loads of different ways. It's not like it's got one killer feature, but it's in lots of subtle ways. I'm not going to go on about it because it's kind of a pointless recommendation, because if everyone you know is on WhatsApp, then you're going to be on WhatsApp, and there's not a great deal you can do about it. But if you do have a choice, if you're going to be setting up a group, if you care about privacy, because Telegram is really strong on that, give Telegram a go.
So the other research tool that I am going to recommend is something that you all would have heard of by now, but it's how you use it is important, which is ChatGPT. So ChatGPT, the AI software that is taking over the world. Well, let's hope it doesn't actually take over the world, but certainly it's taken over the media because everyone is talking about ChatGPT now. Loads of people are using it. On that, I don't think people are using it enough. I really do believe that ChatGPT can help you level up in so many areas of your life, both in work and outside of work. And actually, in our business, we'll be rolling out training on ChatGPT in January for the entire team. So not only encouraging them to use it, but use it well. Like most things in life, you can do it, but doing it well makes a huge difference. And ChatGPT, it's all about the effort that you put into it. And one of the ways I've really get a lot out of ChatGPT is to use it for research. Now, if I'm interested in, say, a supplement, then I'll do on my YouTube research. I'd ask ChatGPT to give me a list of the pros and cons on a certain supplement and ask it only to give me the opinions with science-backed research. So it then goes and cites where it's got the information from as well. Now, ChatGPT doesn't have an opinion. It doesn't care if you particularly like the thought of a supplement or anything else in life. It doesn't have an opinion. And you can direct it to go and get into the research on any subject. But it's not just health you can use it for. I've used it for planning holidays. It's phenomenal. Again, the level of effort that you go into is important. So you may ask, what can I do in this certain area? You can say, though, what should I do in the month of whatever? But then you can tell them about the ages of the people in your family or whoever you're going with, or the interests of the people you're going with. And it will then craft it for those recommendations for you. The effort that you put in will determine the results that you get out. I can imagine a lot of people have played with ChatGPT and been underwhelmed, but that's probably because you've not really given it the effort it needs. But if you do give it some effort, it's a life-changing tool, and it's only going to get better. So the quicker you get on it and the quicker you understand it, I think it's only going to enhance your life.
Yeah, agreed. I feel like I'm a month or two away from having a whole bunch of recommendations on this, based on some of the new stuff that's come out recently, because you can do so much more now. But something I'll quickly mention is the conversation feature that's come out within the last couple of months, where you can literally have a voice chat with it. You go into special mode where you can talk to it, and it, with a scarily realistic voice, will talk back to you. You can imagine situations where this would be really useful. So I've used it, for example, for brainstorming, where to get it to ask me questions, I'll answer those questions and get it to write up what we talked about afterwards. I've used it before I went on holiday to have me brush up on my Spanish and have it talk to me in Spanish and listen to what I said and correct what I said. And of course, it does that with infinite patience, which is pretty amazing. So I completely agree with what you said, Rob. I think it's very easy to tune all this stuff out because there's been so much hype. But it's worth seeing past that because there is so much you can do.
And my final tech recommendation is Live Player. Now, long-time listeners of the podcast will know I'm a dedicated Liverpool fan. We may lose some listeners for that, but that's who I am. That's who I love. So I pay all the subscriptions, all of them, to watch Liverpool. But frustratingly, even though I fork out probably stupid amounts of money every month to watch Liverpool, I can't watch all the games because they're not on TV. Now, I would never, ever illegally stream a game. I would never do that. But if I wanted to watch all Liverpool's games, I would use an app like Live Player, because Live Player allows you to stream sporting events, and you can do other events as well, like boxing as well, if you don't want to do the pay-per-view. Now, of course, I would never do any of those things, but if you wanted to, you could. And you can pay a one-off fee. I think it's roughly £15-20. You can then stream to your TV and remove all the ads. It's a one-off payment, which is good because instead of a subscription. Now, I just use it for completely normal purposes and no streaming of sports events, of course. But if I ever wanted to, Live Player would be the app I use.
Well, I'm sure no one else wants to do that either, but it's good to know that the option's there if anyone does. So we'll move on to our last section, one that we call life hacks. And I've got one, but I think maybe to set the scene, you should go first, Rob. And you put on our notes here, general health.
Well, if you're wondering why we seem semi-obsessed with our health this year, it might be a coincidence or not that we both turned 40 this year. So a milestone birthday for us both. And with that milestone sometimes comes reflection. And I've been really getting into my health and interested in it. Not in a fear way, not in a, oh crap, I'm getting old way, but wait there, I want to feel good. So how can I feel good? And through research and effort, you can. I'm not going to list all the things that I take and do because it's what's right for you and you should do your own research. But putting effort into anything in life normally yields results. And I can honestly tell you that I feel so much better than I did a year ago. I've been living in a fog of tiredness for what feels like 5 years. And it turns out that was my fault. And you can change things. But you can approach it in different ways. And getting your blood work done is a great way to do this if you're interested in this type of thing. Because you get a set of results from your blood work and it'll tell you all your numbers. And then you can see what's in a good range and what isn't. Then I see it like a game. If I want to change a number up or down, I'll then go and research how I can change that number up or down. And then you can go and get another set of blood work done and see how you've gotten on at that game. But it's the best game to play because you're just making your life better. Now, I am not on crazy levels of energy. I'm not lifting up cars when I go outside the house. I'm not breaking 100 meters world record. I just feel better. Not bouncing around the house better, just better. Just a normal better, just a general uplift in energy, mental health and everything. And it's not that it was in a terrible place before. It just wasn't good. And now I just feel like 7 out of 10 most days rather than, the odd 7 out of 10 day and then the odd 4 out of 10 day. It's just better. And by putting effort into anything in life, you yield results. So if what I'm saying appeals to you, start with some blood work, get some numbers, and understand, where things might not be optimal. Because if you start working on this stuff, it will make a big difference.
Yeah, it really will. And you've actually just reminded me of something, talking about measurement and numbers and having a starting point. I did a DEXA scan this year. That's where it takes a measurement of your muscle mass, fat mass, bone density. And if you are going to get serious about making some changes, that could be useful because it gives you an unambiguous starting point. And then you can go back 6 months, a year later and see how those numbers have changed. Not everyone's motivated by numbers, but if you are, that could be worth thinking about. Turning 40 really has done something to us because mine are all about health as well. I've got a couple more. And this makes me feel really old, but shout out to Dan for this one because he mentioned it, which is stretching. Who knew? Stretching is a good thing to do. But I've noticed that I've been waking up in the morning feeling very creaky. And particularly if you're active and training a lot, you're going to have to make some pains. I found just stretching for 5 minutes in the morning made a massive difference and helps me wake up as well. It doesn't really matter what the stretches are. You can go on YouTube and find a million different workouts, but literally just 5 minutes or even less first thing in the morning has made a big difference. And the final thing that I've started doing this year is taping my mouth shut. Not during the day yet.
I've been campaigning, Rob.
I know. I'm finally listening after all these years. And I'm sure you're not the only one, but I'm starting by doing it at night. And this is something that if you're into this kind of thing, you've probably seen people talk about this. I'm not the one who's discovered it. But the idea is that if you gently tape your mouth shut at night, so you breathe through your nose during the night, it has a load of benefits. I can't quantify it because I don't track my sleep, but I feel like I am sleeping better. I think it's also made it easier for me to breathe through my mouth during the day. It just feels easier and I tend not to feel congested anymore. And I imagine that's part physiology, part habit. But mouth taping has worked for me so far.
Well, there you have it. Our full list of resources, the best of Hub Extra this year. Let us know on social media which of these you're using, or even better, for us at least, your recommendations. We'd love to know what your best YouTube channels, books, podcasts, pieces of tech are. Please do share. So head to our social channels, Property Hub UK. There'll be a post on this podcast. Give us your recommendations. We want to know what you are using, what you're enjoying, because we can add it to our list as well. We're pretty geeky, there's no secret about that, so we want to geek out on what other people are using as well and get the most out of life. So please do interact with us on social. And please do join us for a very, very special Ask Rob and Rob on Tuesday, where we have an exclusive guest arriving. And back on the pod next week, we'll be giving you our final market update of the year. So much has been happening. We'll wrap up all the big stories so you can go into Christmas and the new year fully informed.
Yep, looking forward to seeing you then. Thanks for joining us. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.